You can street interview Russians, call them, read their comments online, watch their actions, but it doesn't really give you the whole picture of what's going on inside their heads, what they are planning to do, and how they actually feel about their country invading Ukraine. In this video, you'll see the data that doesn't lie. It's the data from Google that shows how often Russians Google different things. I found some interesting trends that clearly show that there are changes inside the Russian society due to the war. For example, the Russian army is clearly getting bigger since the interest in payment for participating in the war is at an all-time high level, and there is a visible strong upward trend. What's even worse is that many Russians buy into promises of a rich life and they willingly signing contracts to join the invasion force. On this chart, it looks like they started doing so only from spring of 2023. But if I change the keyword to sign the contract, which in Russian usually refers to military contract, then you'll see that the interest in military service steadily growing with huge spikes at the beginning of the invasion and when the mobilization in Russia was announced. So yeah, this looks bad. It doesn't seem like Russia will run out of men anytime soon if we judge only these keyword stats. And what if we check how often Russians wondering when the war will end? There are also huge spikes around the beginning of the war and mobilization, but on this particular chart, it doesn't look like the interest in the end of the war is growing. But it's not quite true. The thing is that people in Russia fear using the term war because it's basically illegal to do so. So they Google special military operation instead. And so by looking at that chart, it does look like many Russians want this to be over soon. But I don't want to give you false hopes. If you check the comparison between two opposing groups of Russians, those who want the invasion to stop and those who want to participate in it, we'll see that the wannabe soldiers outnumbered the peace seekers. Of course, it's a bad news. Though I suspect that the situation would have been different if we could see the data from all the Russians around the world, not only those who live in Russia currently. And I suspect that many already left Russia since the interest in emigration is dropping significantly. It's not quite seen on this chart, but if you look at interest in the exchange rate of 1 ruble to Kazakhstan tenge, we'll see that Russians have become less interested in it either because they no longer want to leave to Kazakhstan, or maybe because they already left. I don't know why, but there is definitely something going on in Russia economically. The interest in withdrawing money is significantly higher even compared to the beginning of the war when everything was so uncertain. I suspect it has something to do with Putin's re-election. Probably for a large part of the Russian population, it was a signal that they shouldn't expect anything good from it. And they definitely feel more anxious right now than they ever felt for the past 5 years. They Google anxiety abnormally too often lately. And it's clear that the trend is only going up after coronavirus and the start of the invasion. Speaking of what Russians truly feel, I suspect that the big chunk of Russian society has been depressed after the invasion began. I'm not a doctor, but let me just show you some facts. Russians Google pills more often than they were Googling them during the pandemic. If you think that it's a global trend, here's how the pills trend looks like in the US. It's actually going down. Now, what kind of pills are becoming popular in Russia throughout this war? First of all, it's the pills from headache. There is a steady upward trend, but there is also a high demand for pills from high blood pressure. So one of the not so obvious consequences of this war is that Russian society becomes more unhealthy, anxious, and depressed. One of the signs of depression is sleepiness and the lack of energy. And guess what? Russians have been very sleepy for the past 2.5 years, even more so than during the pandemic. Let's dig even deeper. Depressed people care less about the way they look. So let's see how often Russians Google makeup. You see that the interest declined over the course of the war. And what about sports? The same story here. People aren't as interested in sports as they were before this war. Also, it might be related to the fact that Russia was banned from many sport competitions because of the war. And what about bad habits and addictions? Depressed people tend to fall for them more oftenly. Yep, it seems Russians have become gamblers. Obviously, many of them deal with depression in old Soviet manner by drinking hard liquor, which led to some of them asking Google on how to stop drinking. Maybe that's also the reason why Russians Google the pills from headaches so much. And another reason why Russians are so anxious lately is because Russia isn't safe due to convicts being released from the war and from prisons, also due to terrorist attacks and just due to the war. Probably that's the reason why so many Russians have been interested in purchasing pepper spray lately. So what we have here is a divided society. Z lovers eager to join meat grinder, and just regular people who sick of the war, feels anxious and depressed, who became addicted and less healthy and less interested in life in general. That's the price they pay for being silent observers of their country becoming a terrorist state. That's it for today's video. If you found it interesting, please smash the like button. Thank you. Until the next time.